Penanda, diolch yn fawr iawn fi Ingwahoth. I think I'll start with the issue which is uppermost in a lot of people's minds at the moment, which is the issue of second homes, particularly in Wales. And we've seen how in many parts of Wales, particularly the coastal and scenic areas, the explosion in second homes has pretty well driven local people out of the market. There's just no means to buy or rent for most local people because the price has just gone through the ceiling as people not from the local area have bought up homes either to rent out as holiday lets or just for their own personal use, or generally, it now turns out, a mixture of both for reasons that I'll describe in a moment. And it's really a dire situation. I mean, catastrophic for local households who just can't get a foothold in their own community. But of course, for the whole community itself, in some cases, we're looking at community death. And it happens that many of these places are strongholds of Welsh language and culture. And so this has huge societal as well as individual impacts. And nationwide now in the UK, we see that there are roughly twice as many second homes as there are homeless households. This is really a grotesque, a truly disgusting situation. And you would expect that any reasonable government to make great efforts to correct that situation and to ensure that homes are for those who need them, rather than allowing greed to displace need. But the opposite has happened. While in Wales, uniquely, local authorities are allowed to charge double the council tax rate on second homes. Homeowners are allowed to, the second homeowners are allowed to switch to being business rate payers if they rent out their homes for holiday lets for a certain amount of time, and then apply for the 100% business rate discount, small business rate discount, so they end up paying no tax at all. On top of that, since the pandemic began, a second homeowner could apply for £63,000 in government grants. It's basically the richest people get the most money. It's really outrageous. But what this illustrates is a much wider problem to do with both taxation and to do with planning. Now, the reason that houses are so expensive is not because bricks and mortar are so expensive. It's because the land underneath them is so expensive. And that land has risen in price by over 500% since 1995. And it's done so not because of all the people who are underhoused and desperate for housing. They're not the drivers of effective demand. It's the people with the money who are the drivers of effective demand. And what's really extraordinary about this whole situation is that during the whole period in which more and more people have become underhoused or indeed homeless, we've seen the number of bedrooms per person nationwide rising. We've seen more accommodation per head across the whole country, but that's very poorly distributed. And it's poorly distributed because basically the land market has become a speculative market, and it responds to those who've got money to burn. And the second home crisis is just a tip of the iceberg. Just as homelessness is the tip of the iceberg of underhousing, second homes are the tip of the iceberg of the totally irrational way in which we use land in this country. And what we try to do with the Land for the Many report is to propose what we think is a rational, progressive set of policy proposals. After the billionaire press got hold of it, we had to double check the report to make sure we weren't actually calling for the slaughter of the firstborn and the herding of all owner-occupiers into prison camps. We thought they were actually quite sensible proposals, but you can see what a nerve it touches amongst the very rich in this country, that even if you discuss changing land policy a tiny bit, they go berserk. So to give you just a few examples, because we have very little time, what we're calling for is replacing council tax with a progressive property taxation, which the owners, not the tenants, pay. And that would be raised significantly for second homes and for vacant homes. And by significantly, I think it needs to be a lot more than 100%. I mean, maybe we should be looking at 500, 1000%. to seriously deter this scourge from causing community death around the country. But then, to have basically a fair system nationwide. And then if we look at second homes again, there should be planning permission for change of use. If you have changed that house from being a residential place to being a second home, you should get planning permission for that change of use. And in planning in general, what we want to see is far more control by local authorities with a community participation agency to ensure that local people have much more engagement in that process, even jury service for planning to ensure that there's a much wider spread across the socioeconomic spectrum of people who are involved in that. But the setting up of public development corporations, which will assemble land and then bring in ideally local builders to build homes on that land, rather than just leaving it to this speculative land market, and altogether creating a situation where it's much more likely that the right houses are built for those who need them. And obviously, I think we all agree that what we desperately need is more social homes and affordable homes. And by affordable homes, I mean affordable homes, not affordable homes. But we need those to be geared to the actual need in the actual community, rather than just handed down nationally and imposed on local authorities, so that local authorities can determine their own need and then can actually, through public development corporations, through their own land assembly, go out and meet that need. These are just a tiny handful. I would urge you very strongly, please read our report, because I actually think it's got some great stuff in it. Beth and I are just 2 of 7 authors. I'm the least qualified of them all, but there's some really brilliant people that we've involved in the making of this report. And I think if our recommendations were applied, things would really change for the better.